Days 2 and 3, The Obstacles to Joy. You are a masterpiece in the making. It is very simple, the Dalai Lama began. Everyone knows that physical pain is bad and tries to avoid it. We do this not only by curing diseases, but also by trying to prevent them and by trying to keep our physical immunity strong. Mental pain is equally bad, so we should try to alleviate it as well. The way to do this is to develop mental immunity. We had started our second day of dialogues and were turning to the obstacles to joy. The subject of the dialogues was how to discover joy in the face of suffering, and we knew we'd need 2 full days to discuss all of the ways that we suffer. As the Dalai Lama had said the day before, so much of our unhappiness originates within our own mind and heart, in how we react to events in our life. Mental immunity, the Dalai Lama explained, is just learning to avoid the destructive emotions and to develop the positive ones. First, we must understand the mind. There are so many different states of mind, the diverse thoughts and emotions we experience on a daily basis. Some of these thoughts and emotions are harmful, even toxic, while others are healthy and healing. The former disturb our mind and cause much mental pain. The latter bring us true joyfulness. When we understand this reality, it is much easier to deal with the mind and to take preventive measures. This is how we develop mental immunity. And just as a healthy immune system and healthy constitution protects your body against potentially hazardous viruses and bacteria, mental immunity creates a healthy disposition of the mind so that it will be less susceptible to negative thoughts and feelings. Think about it this way. If your health is strong, when viruses come, they will not make you sick. If your overall health is weak, even small viruses will be very dangerous for you. Similarly, if your mental health is sound, then when disturbances come, you will have some distress but quickly recover. If your mental health is not good, then some small disturbances, small problems will cause you much pain and suffering. You will have much fear and worry, much sadness and despair, and much anger and aggravation. People would like to be able to take a pill that makes their fear and anxiety go away and makes them immediately feel peaceful. This is impossible. One must develop the mind over time and cultivate mental immunity. Often people ask me for the quickest and best solution to a problem. Again, this is impossible. You can have quickest or you can have best solution, but not both. The best solution to our suffering is mental immunity, but it takes time to develop. One time I was talking with Al Gore, the American vice president. He said that he had lots of problems, lots of difficulties that were causing him a great deal of anxiety. I said to him that we human beings have the ability to make a distinction between the rational level and the emotional level. At the rational level, we accept that this is a serious problem that we have to deal with, but at the deeper, more emotional level, we are able to keep calm. Like the ocean has many waves on the surface, but deep down it is quite calm. This is possible if we know how to develop mental immunity. Yes, the Archbishop replied. You have answered very well. You always answer well, but you have done this one quite well. The only thing I think is that people sometimes get quite annoyed with themselves unnecessarily, especially when they have thoughts and feelings that really are quite natural. Basically, the Archbishop continued, I think we've got to accept ourselves as we are, and then hope to grow in much the way the Dalai Lama described. I mean, getting to know what the things are that trigger us. These are things that you can train, you can change, but we ought not to be ashamed of ourselves. We are human, and sometimes it is a good thing that we recognize that we have human emotions. Now, the thing is being able to say, when is it appropriate? Throughout the week of dialogues, the Archbishop said many times that we should not berate ourselves for our negative thoughts and emotions, that they are natural and unavoidable. They are only made more intense, he argued, by the glue of guilt and shame when we think we should not have them. The Dalai Lama agreed that human emotions are natural, but he did argue about whether they are unavoidable. Mental immunity, he explained, is the way to avoid them. For months after our time in Dharamshala, I wrestled with this seeming disagreement. Is it possible to truly prevent negative thoughts and emotions, to develop what the Dalai Lama was calling mental immunity? Or are these thoughts and emotions inevitable? And should we, as the Archbishop was suggesting, just accept them and forgive ourselves for having them? Finally, after many discussions with psychological experts, It became clear that each position was valid and simply reflected a different stage in the cycle of emotional life. Through self-inquiry and meditation, we can discover the nature of our mind and learn to soothe our emotional reactivity. This will leave us less vulnerable to the destructive emotions and thought patterns that cause us so much suffering. This is the process of developing mental immunity. The Archbishop was simply reminding us that even with this immunity, there will be times when we will have negative or destructive emotions, and when this does happen, the last thing we want to do is judge ourselves harshly. In other words, the Dalai Lama was saying that if we eat healthy, take our vitamins, and get enough rest, we can stay healthy, and the Archbishop was saying, yes, even so, there will be times when we will catch a cold, and we should not make it worse by beating up on ourselves. So how do we deal with these obstacles to joy, the inevitable sources of suffering, both internal and external, that cause so much pain and anguish in our lives when they do arise? These range from the everyday troubles of stress, frustration, and worry to the life-defining experiences of adversity, illness, and ultimately having to face death. We cannot control the inevitability of these occurrences, but both men agreed that we could influence their effect in our life by adjusting the attitude we take toward them. The first step is to accept the reality of suffering. The Buddha is supposed to have said, "I have taught one thing and one thing only, suffering and the cessation of suffering." The first noble truth of Buddhism is that life is filled with suffering. The Sanskrit word for suffering is dukkha, not to be confused with the nutty and very tasty Egyptian condiment dukkha. Dukkha can be translated as stress, anxiety, suffering, or dissatisfaction. It is often described as the mental and physical suffering that occurs in life, illness, and aging. It is also described as the stress and anxiety that arise from the attempt to control what is fundamentally impermanent and unable to be controlled. We try to control the moment, which results in our feeling that what is happening should not be happening. So much of what causes heartache is our wanting things to be different than they are. I think in many cases, the Dalai Lama explained, you develop some sort of unhappiness, some discontent, which leads to frustration and anger.